that I will take this obligation freely,
that I will take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Welcome, Commissioner
Thank you.
Wetzel.
Yes, welcome. Item 1B on the agenda is the introduction of Commissioner Wetzel. I had the pleasure of serving on the EDAC with Commissioner Wetzel for 2 years, so welcome. If you want to say a couple words.
Well, thanks. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this commission. Previously, I was on the former Economic Development Advisory Commission for 6 years, the last 2 as chair of that commission. And what I found serving the city in this capacity was that you got to know a lot more about the city, and you got to know some of the priorities, and you got to see all the things that are happening in this great city, and it really made me proud to be a West Sacramento. And so I am looking forward to serving with all of you, and looking forward to serving the city in this capacity, and thank you for allowing me to be here. How about that?
Great, welcome. Next item on the agenda, 1C, is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission is prohibited by law from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time.
We have no one.
Okay, with nobody on the card, we'll move on to commission communications. Item 1D. Anything to report?
Typically, this is a good opportunity for members of the commission to express some information that they've obtained on other boards, other commissions, and just provide that information to the general public.
Anybody have anything like to share?
We forgot to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, we did. First I forgot the name of the commission, and then I forgot to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Wetzel, as the newly sworn-in commissioner, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I salute pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. With those 2 snafus out of the way, we'll move on to the consent agenda in consideration of the approval of the meeting minutes from the April 8th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review?
So I move we approve the meeting minutes.
I second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Great. Moving on to item 3 of the regular agenda. Item 3, consideration of funding applications for the 2015 Active Transportation Program.
Good evening, Chris Doherty, Transportation Program Specialist with the City Public Works Department. The item before you this evening is the consideration of the funding applications for the 2015 Active Transportation Program. The Active Transportation Program combines several existing funding sources that included the Bicycle Transportation Account, Safe Routes to School, and Recreation Trail funds into one large program that funds active transportation projects throughout the state. Each ATP cycle has 2 calls for projects. One is a statewide call for projects, and the other is a regional call for projects run by the local Metropolitan Transportation Organization, or in our case, SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. The current cycle of ATP will fund approximately $360 million worth of projects. 50% of that will go to the statewide call for projects, and 40% of that will go to the regional calls for projects statewide. Applications for this program for the statewide call are due on June 1st, so they're coming up. And then the regional call for projects will be due on June 19th. And they take a staggered approach. Applications that are submitted to the statewide call for projects that are not funded automatically fall down to the regional call for projects. So you really only need to submit your application into one program, and it goes through the steps. The city will be submitting 4 applications this year, and that is the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3, which is a consists of a bike and pedestrian overpass over Highway 50/80, starting from Joey Lopes Park, which is going to be going into construction soon, landing on the Westmore Oaks Elementary, or the former River City High School. And then just to the south of that school, there'll be a bike trail also added all the way down to the intersection of Park and Stone. Second project is going to be the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail Extension. Our very popular trail in the Southport area. We are looking to extend that an additional 2.2 miles from River City High School down to the South River Road trestle, if you are familiar with that. Which we think will greatly expand the ability for recreational abilities through the Southport area. The Linden Road Sidewalk Extension Project to extend the sidewalk, which is a current gap in the pedestrian network from, I believe it's Stonegate to Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. That would be the frontage right in front of Our Lady of Grace Elementary School. And there's a second component, which is from River City High School on the south side of the street, a small sidewalk that would connect from River City High School to the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. And lastly is the West Capitol Avenue cycle track, which takes the remaining stub of West Capitol Avenue from Garden Street to Fifth and removes a travel lane. And in place of that travel lane, we'll put a two-way bike and pedestrian trail, adding connectivity through that area. And the remaining lane will be one-way, and they have not determined the direction of that travel yet. That'll be done through an engineering study at a later time. So these are the 4 projects we're going to be applying for in June, and this concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. All very exciting opportunities. Open it up to the commission for comment or questions.
Yeah, Chris, I had a question. Are these the same priorities for the regional program? It appears that these are the ones you've established or the city's established for the, it's called the ATP, but I know SACOG has its own funding program. So would these be similar to what we'd be submitting for SACOG consideration, or?
Sure. SACOG is running their flexible funding programs a little bit different this year because of the active transportation program. So all statewide call for statewide projects for ATP, those projects that I'll be submitting for that, will fall down to both the regional active transportation program and the SACOG bike and pedestrian trail funding program at the same time, and they'll go through that process in parallel.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
How are the projects being scored by the commission?
Are they being scored by the commission?
Yeah, like how does the commission decide which projects they would fund, and then from there, which projects get kicked back down to?
From ATP?
Yeah.
They're scored from a pool of reviewers. They are based on several criteria, largely to increase walking and ridership is the largest goal, and to increase safety is another component as well. And they're scored individually on these components. The other topic is how much public participation and community input did those projects have. We were very lucky that we had a very new bike and pedestrian trails master plan that went through a very extensive vetting process through public participation. So we have a great prioritized list of projects ready to go for these funding rounds.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wetzel? Okay. Thank you. How many such grants has the city of West Sacramento received in the past? Recently? Because I see there's one planning grant here for 2014. Have there been other approved monies to West Sacramento under this program?
Under this program, its first year was last year.
Oh, okay.
We submitted 5 applications last year, and we funded one project in its entirety, and that was about 10.3 miles of new bike lanes throughout the city, filling gaps in the existing bike lane network. And the other project that was partially funded was the West Capitol Avenue cycle track. They funded the design component of that, about $87,000.
if we were lucky enough to get funding for all four, would we be able to do all four with our matching funds, or would we have to prioritize them?
I think we would make arrangements to get all four done. It's really a great way to leverage existing funds to, using these programs. While this program at the statewide does not have any match associated with it, they do score for the leveraging of funds that you bring to the table, so.
Great. Any other comments or questions?
I do have one. Or it's more of a comment. It's just, as you described all of these projects, and especially with this commission, it's really hard to imagine in my head where these things are. So I was wondering if in the future, as we're reviewing some of these transportation things, if there's a way to put a map together so that we can kind of visually kind of go, okay, that's where that is and that is. That would really be helpful to kind of understand where you're talking about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, item 4, consideration of the expansion to the city's parking enforcement program.
Good evening, again. The item for you for consideration is the expansion of the city's parking enforcement program. The riverfront districts, currently the Washington and the Bridge District and the Central District, are expected to significantly urbanize over the next decade and possibly 2 decades. Washington and Bridge District alone are expected to have approximately 7,500 new residential units and 8.4 million square feet of commercial space in those 2 districts. To meet the need of that shift of land use, the city is moving to an increasingly urbanizing parking strategy that will include measures such as like shared public parking, unbundling parking from development projects, and on-street parking pricing structures to really ensure the availability of parking on the street. For these programs to succeed, and a lot of these new modern progressive parking strategies, enforcement is a key strategy. We need that so it's the third leg of the stool to make all that work. So to meet those needs, we've identified 3 choices to expand our current program. One would be to increase the city's existing parking program just outright and just fund it. And it's a fairly intense capital outlay to do that, hire new people permanently and buy a bunch of new equipment. To contract with the city of Sacramento to expand the city's parking enforcement. We've been in talks with the city of Sacramento. They have offered their services to us to be able to patrol. And the third option, which is the hybrid option, which we are recommending, is to contract with the city of Sacramento on a short-term basis annually, and eventually take the revenue from whatever tickets come in to fund the expansion of our own program. And that is the option that we are recommending because of that minimal capital outlay, but it provides us a pretty robust level of enforcement immediately. So that primarily concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions you have.
In option 3, sounds like it's the hybrid approach as you discussed. What is the term, the transition of opportunities? How much detail has gone into planning what the transition would be, or also, how that would look? Is there more detail behind that, or is it kind of conceptual at this point?
Yeah, and forgive me, I should have introduced, Donna Rosner with the police department is also here for other questions too. So it's tough to know because that would be basically generated from the revenue of tickets, and we don't have any historical data really to generate that. What we're aiming for here is an annual contract with the city so that we can make those decisions and keep the utmost flexibility in that decision-making process.
What are our costs, do we think, at this point? I know it's probably still early on in negotiations, but we have costs here for what it would start up a new program. But as far as just having Sacramento do it in general or this phased approach, what are we looking at cost-benefit wise?
It's very, very minimal costs, and those are largely add-ons that we are looking at wanting. Perception for our city residents is really key. So we would be buying, at least we've been talking about buying a magnetic sign to, on their vehicles to come over, so they would look like a City of West Sacramento patrol officer. All the tickets would still say City of West Sacramento. So those are the things that we would probably have some capital outlay to produce. But as for, for their cost coming over, we've been talking about a revenue sharing agreement based on the tickets. And they are saying, at this point, no upfront cost, we'll just split revenue on the tickets.
Yeah, on parking enforcement, I guess there's a couple different ways to look at it. One is from the resident standpoint, you know, you want to have available parking on street, but in some cases, because of the on-site restrictions, people, you know, park on street. So my question has to do with what kind of oversight are we going to have since we're farming out this operation? And also a little bit of a concern about the revenue aspect of this, primarily because I know it's a revenue generator, and there tends to be a lot of active enforcement in the city of Sacramento to generate revenue. So what kind of transition is going to occur with the neighbors so that they understand and they can adjust to a more robust parking enforcement program?
I would probably anticipate a little bit of a soft start of the program, some warnings and some, it'd be a fairly large increase in enforcement if we, to start immediately. I would think we would kind of taper into that a little bit and leave some warnings. To address the concern about revenue, our thought is to take the revenue and earmark it strictly for expansion of our own enforcement abilities, so that we can lessen our need on the adjacent jurisdiction as quickly as we can.
And what kind of oversight do we have?
Sure. We would be basically contracting services to them, so we would have whatever level of oversight we would feel we would need through that contracting process. And that is definitely one of those topics that keeps coming up and is something that we are really pushing for the utmost of control over those officers when they are in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, I live within the enforcement area, so, and I'm not saying it's not needed, particularly with the arena going on, but I just want to make sure that there's communication with the neighbors. I assume you're going to be posting, there's going to be changes in on-street, you know, signage, for example, which we don't have any restrictions on that, so
No.
I'm assuming that this program will involve a lot of changes in terms of posting of signs and restrictions within residential neighborhoods.
This is a small part of a larger program to kind of really reform some of our parking policies throughout the city. And so we'll be taking, and basically the overall theme of that, of those parking policies is the city will now be an active participant in the parking strategies throughout the districts. Because there'll be that push-pull happening, and so we will need to be involved as much as we can so that we can react to what is happening on the ground. So yes, we can move quickly to deploy signs in an area around your neighborhood if that is a needed issue, if you need some kind of time parking, and use certain mechanisms to kind of cushion from the adjacent development that is happening for those that actually still rely on street parking as their only parking needs.
Okay. I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Okay.
What's the timeline that you're looking at here?
We are envisioning a September 1st start date for that.
Do we currently have like an online infrastructure for collecting parking revenue? I've never gotten a parking ticket in West Sac, so not, I haven't done that research. Or is it all kind of by mail or in person at this point? Okay. So are we planning on looking at building kind of the necessary infrastructure to collect it? Because once we start issuing more tickets, that's a lot of paperwork and staff time to go through to collect it. And I'm sure we want to make it as easy as possible on people to pay their parking tickets.
So that's kind of part of the cafeteria services that they can actually provide to us as well, is what level do we take over the adjudication of the tickets? They could take over a couple of the first steps that are just the payment options, and then, or and the next level of appealing that decision. But at some level, we do need to step in because we are a different county under a different jurisdiction, and we would need to effectively adjudicate those tickets at the Yolo County level if they get appealed up to a certain level. So those are some of the details that we're working through with the city and what fits our needs and the needs of our citizens the best.
Because I doubt that anybody would want to go online to a City of Sacramento website to pay for a City of West Sacramento ticket, considering everything that's going on with parking revenue in Sacramento, so.
That is one of our concerns of perception, is we would have our own City of West Sacramento portals into their system if that is how we go.
But it also seems with the jurisdictional differences that that there also will need to be some level of consistency between the two. I'm thinking, especially with a lot of people in a year and a half coming into the downtown core, that there will be a lot of need for consistency, or else there'll be a lot of confusion as to where does this ticket go to. There'll be a lot of people who may not know West Sacramento is different from Sacramento. So I think that there needs to be a very clear expectation of both sides exactly what's going to, what is the definite jurisdictional differences between the two, what is the different policies, so that where there are differences, that those are clearly delineated between the two, the contract that the one set of parking enforcement is doing and what they're doing for their own city. Because I can see just human error, one person who's working on this, and then the second half of the day, maybe they're working on the other side of the river, and then all of a sudden their mind goes screwy or something. I don't know. I just thinking of just some of those logistical challenges of having two jurisdictions, two contracts, but one set of folks kind of doing that.
One of the themes of the larger parking program that we're going to be deploying is to align a lot of the look and feel of how parking happens on this side of the river compared to the other side of the river. So things like we maybe look at piggybacking on their parking meter contracts so that they don't look any different than they do when you cross the river. So it's already a known entity. And a lot of the policies could be similarly forged where it would seem pretty seamless for anybody not knowing what jurisdiction they're in. So it would be as fluid as a downtown as possible as the urban core moves to the west.
I know this is early, but has there been any discussion about what different parking citation fines could do to, the parking situation as people come downtown for basketball games or for baseball games even, different pricing, citation, fine levels, how that could impact people's decisions in parking?
We have been doing a lot of comparison of our ticket structure versus their ticket structure, just because we have done things a little bit differently in the past versus them. We are higher on some levels and they are higher on other citations. One of our primary concerns, and I think you alluded to it, is that with the ESC coming on board and with the streetcar coming online in the next few years, that we don't turn into a park and ride over
Right.
here. And so this is another way, but we're really trying to combat that. So the more streamlined and the more congruent both jurisdictions are on the parking end of things, I think it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, the park and ride might not necessarily be a bad thing if we have businesses that are supported by people visiting the arena, but not just to park here and then be willing to face the ticket rather versus going across the river.
Exactly.
Any other comments? Questions?
I just think one thing to be cautious of when dealing or going into any sort of contract is maintaining customer service levels. We're a bit spoiled here in West Sacramento with our interactions with our city government. We've come to have a good customer service level here, always pleasant interactions generally with us. And just to maintain that if we're going to farm out the adjudication process and as far as the collection of the money, because I think there might be nothing more frustrating than calling down to Sacramento, City of Sacramento, and having to deal with their staff. And it's a different customer service. It's a different interaction with the community that we have here in West Sacramento.
I definitely agree. That's something we're definitely taking into consideration.
Okay, with No more comments or questions. Thank you for the report. And that concludes the agenda for today's meeting. I think the last item is the adjournment, unless we are waiting to future agenda item requests by the Transportation Mobility Infrastructure Commission. Is there any future requests?
I'm sorry that I was not here at the last meeting, but at the last meeting, did we have like kind of a orientation of all the different facets of this commission and what it does and all of that?
To answer your question, we did have some discussion previously, as the commission may recall, prior to actually our formal first date, we, as a group, sat down with the mayor, and the mayor provided some feedback as to what the council's expectations are for the commission and what the roles are going to be for the commissioners.
Then I will work with you to get a little bit better feel for it so that I can look through it through that lens then. Thank you.
I'm happy to provide that for you.
First.
I did skip a couple items here, so let's go back. Future agenda items, I think we asked last meeting if we could get for the commission, get a report for the rail car and the trolley car, excuse me, and also the bridge update, a general bridge update.
And I'll definitely put those items on the agenda for your next meeting. There will be some significant new information for the streetcar, as well as for both the I Street Bridge Replacement Project and Broadway Bridge.
Great, thank you.
I do remember from the last meeting, I think there was a request for a map. And we talked about the, I think it was the mobility element. And if you had a map, a diagram that went with that, that could kind of show the designations of the street system. And I know we've talked about the bike master plan. Just some graphics kind of related to the other commissioners' comments, so we can kind of identify more specifically where these priority projects are and where the system fits together. That would be appreciated.
You did receive an update on the mobility element for the general plan. The general plan as a whole is currently being updated. There will be a number of new exhibits that are going to be generated with that, including new maps. And so I'll work with the Community Development Department to see if we can't get you some more of those exhibits.
Yeah, thanks.
Going back to General Administration Part 2, Part A, Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission calendar. Our next meeting is what date again? I could fumble through my iPhone, but I don't know if I'll find it very quickly.
July 6th.
July 6th. Great. Any other items, agenda, calendar dates of note that we should keep in mind? Okay. Reports from city staff. Anything else to follow up there, Jason?
No additional reports at this time.
Great, thank you. Then the last item is the adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Great. Meeting's adjourned.